Hello, everyone, and welcome to the From Those Who Know panel. Osio, Mandy Harris Dagwada, Jijalagi. Hello, my name is Mandy Harris. I am a Cherokee Nation citizen, a children's librarian, a PhD candidate at the University of Washington Information School, and I have the absolute joy of moderating this session. So much of who we are comes from those who love us, those who share with us the wisdom and the joys of their lives. The connection between grandparent and grandchild can be a powerful and transformative one. I personally was fortunate enough to have grown up with not only my grandparents, but two of my great grandparents who gave me the gifts of knowledge, wisdom, language, cultural connections, and the stories that had been passed down to them. And now let's discuss beautiful stories that solidify that intergenerational connection that is so powerful and important. In today's picture books, we see knowledge and love shine through generations through creativity and togetherness. I am so excited to welcome Tanya Angel, illustrator of Gwendolyn Wallace's Dancing with Water, published by Penguin Young Readers. Welcome, Tanya.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you. And I'm also excited to welcome Jenn Moudahi, author of Charlotte's New Moccasins, published by Charles Bridge. Welcome.
Hello.
And also, please join me in welcoming Vesper Stamper, illustrator of Daniel Nayeri's A Knot is Not a Tangle, published by Random House Children's Books.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Vesper. So I loved each of these books tremendously, and I cannot wait to share them with others. I've already planned how I'm going to book talk them and use them in story times. And I also love to hear how creators describe their own works in their own words. And so I would like to hear from each of you in your own words. And so first, let us begin with Tanya. Tanya, please tell us about Dancing with Water. What should the audience today know about it?
Dancing with Water inspired me from the very first moment that I read the book. I immediately felt like a connection with the main character, Kit, um, who I actually, one of my daughter's siblings is non-binary, so I thought it was really important to tell that story. The grandfather, immediate connection because he was almost exact a spitting image, his dignity, his pride, his, quiet strength, really reminded me of my own grandfather. And he was someone that we spent a lot of time with while he was on this earth. And he shared a lot of his knowledge with us and taught us everything we knew about building things and growing things and doing things with our hands. And those connections really stayed with me throughout the illustration process of doing this book. It made it a lot easier.
Oh, I love that. Those connections. We all find those personal connections in books and we can extend them into our own lives. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now over to Jenn. What would you like to share with us about Charlotte's New Moccasins? Please describe this delightful book for us.
Thanks, Mandy. Well, at the beginning of the book, we meet Charlotte, and she's really upset because she's outgrown her favorite pair of moccasins. So we head over to Grandma's house, and what's special about this time is she's involved in the whole process of sewing a new pair of moccasins with Grandma. Grandma has all the knowledge and the supplies, but she lets Charlotte pick out her own leather, her own fur, her own like the beading design that goes on the toe, which ends up being really special for both of them. And even though they're working towards a goal, they're making moccasins. I think what's special for me is the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. There's this building of memories and this passing of cultural knowledge to a new generation. Um, and then after the story, if readers want a little bit more, there's some information about moccasins, both in the past and a little bit about how they've changed now, and then just some facts that I found interesting about moccasins in general.
I love that you describe that how Grandma empowers Charlotte. That was one of my, even while she's teaching her and showing her how to do things, she's empowering her to step into the knowledge and to be a future ancestor, to be a future leader. Really appreciated that. All right, and Vesper, please tell us all about A Knot is Not a Tangle.
I had hidden the mute button unwittingly. Thank you, everybody. So A Knot is Not a Tangle is about a little boy and his grandmother making a Persian rug together when their old one, which is full of all these family memories, just gets too worn out for daily use. And this might seem unusual for those of us who think of a rug as something that you just grab on a Target run or else as an object that's a sign of conspicuous wealth. But in this rural Persian family, it's simply one home-based craft among many, like tending livestock or cooking. And it's often these simple utilitarian objects that offer a chance to express extraordinary beauty. So my friend Daniel Nairi wrote this book based on his own experience growing up near a city called Isfahan and helping his own grandmother make a Persian rug. And he actually has several of her rugs in his home today. So we knew we wanted to begin collaborating on books in general. So Daniel sent me several stories to consider. And this one really resonated with me because we felt that we could make a book that felt grounded in family and tradition, which are important to both of us, but also to get to dig in deep, with the visual research and the nerdy, detailed illustration process. And so we really looked to books by Patricia Polacco in particular. She was really front of our minds as our inspiration because books like hers feel universal in their specificity, and they capture a particular aspect of a culture. And in this case, we did that with Daniel's Persian background.
I really love that ancestral connection, not just in what's being passed down from the grandparents to the grandchild, but you're looking at literary ancestors among picture books, looking at Patricia Polacco and taking that inspiration into. So there's ancestors all around us. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Vesper. And as I was reading through these books, I was thinking about perfection. There can be so much focus and pressure on the pursuit of perfection. And I have a little note above my desk that says, "Don't let perfect be the enemy of done." And so, one of the aspects of these books is that I appreciated so much among many is that there's an elder showing a child how to maintain connection, how to create something, whether we're making moccasins or making a rug or making a connection with the land and with water. There's a lesson in this of not seeking perfection, not being discouraged in the face of setbacks, and that the joy and the beauty are in connection and in not giving up, even in the face of mistakes and challenges. And so, Jenn, I wanted to begin with you in this kind of topic area. One of my favorite moments in Charlotte's New Moccasins is when she spills all the beads. And I'm a beader myself, and so I know the panic of that moment. All of your beautifully organized beads being in a jumble on the floor, and they're the tiniest little things. Good fine motor skill challenge. And Charlotte's so apologetic and so nervous, but Grandma reacts with patience and with kindness and reassurance, and it was such a lovely moment. And Charlotte's grandma is so patient and lovely that she made me want to always be as patient and kind as she is with the young relatives in my life. And so I am curious about this characterization of grandma and also of Charlotte. So, Jenn, talk to us about your craft. What is your writing process like?
I love that these are the qualities that came to mind for grandma. I drew pretty heavily from my own experiences for this story. And so I think that probably made certain things easier to write about. One of them being grandma. It was my mom actually who taught me to make moccasins in her workshop in our basement. And all those wonderful things that you mentioned in the story really stem from my mom and my memories of being in her workshop together. And now, actually, it's been really special to see my mom as a grandma to my kids with all of those qualities that are still there. Um, and then I think for some of the other pieces, like the idea of using two different colors of leather in the moccasins, that also stems from my own experience. As a teenager, I asked my mom to make me a very colorful pair of moccasins. And so we used this leather that had been dyed. And anyways, my moccasins ended up being purple and blue and green, and it was fantastic. Uh, but I remember how meaningful it was for me that my mom, she didn't bat an eye. She didn't try to convince me to make a more traditional pair. Um, she just blended this cultural knowledge of making moccasins with my crazy teenage ideas. And so I think this is also a piece in the book of mixing tradition with personal flair, um, that made the writing a little bit easier, because it was real. But generally speaking, maybe for my writing process, I wish I could tell you I had a fine-tuned writing process. Uh, I kind of just write whenever I can squeeze it in. So I sometimes will sit down and write an entire draft in one sitting, and sometimes months go by and I haven't even written a single sentence. But I have two young kids, which I think is possibly the culprit for this scatterbrainedness. And whenever I start a book, I start it in a Google Doc, and then I can add notes in my phone if I've got a baby napping on me and I think of something that I don't want to let go, or I think even like breastfeeding, my thoughts are percolating, and um, so it's very spontaneous, and I think also pretty exploratory. Um, I kind of like to just see how things evolve as I go rather than plan too far ahead, which is actually quite strange because anybody who knows me would know that I am like a planner to the T. So I'm not sure how that works, but usually I have a theme or a topic in mind. I just don't have the whole story mapped out. Um, yeah, also Charlotte was a bit of a journey because this was the first manuscript I wrote that wasn't in rhyme. And so there was quite a bit of learning that happened along the way.
Well, first of all, you just made me feel a whole lot better that when you said that sometimes months go by and you don't write a sentence. That just made me feel a whole lot better about my own procrastination. I love that idea of we're keeping the tradition, but we're adding our own personal flair onto it. And I kind of hear that also in how you write, your writing style. You have this writing tradition, but you're using the technology, using the time available, as you fit it into your life. That's really beautiful. I love that all of those connections coming together. And I really want a pair of moccasins now that are purple and blue and green.
Do
Um,
it.
that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenn. And Vesper, in A Knot is Not a Tangle, the child repeatedly refers to how perfect the rug will be, but the grandmother reminds them that they're not pursuing perfection. One of my favorite parts is when she talks about instead of making it perfect, they're going to make it with care.
Mhm.
And in fact, in the end, she deliberately makes the rug imperfect. And so, Vesper, in your work as an illustrator, how do you create with care and resist that temptation of perfection?
It's funny, my husband has a joke that I've taken procrastination to an art form because I'm such a perfectionist. And he says that I procrastinate from work by giving myself more work until I'm so overwhelmed at the pile on, in front of me. But it's a great question because I actually don't know any artist who's not a secret perfectionist, no matter how groovy and airy fairy they are, because one of the most important aspects of being an illustrator, to me, is the relationship with my own body. It's why I work traditionally and not digitally. I do use digital tools, but I only use them at the very end for correcting obvious mistakes. Whether we're illustrators or any other pursuit, we're constantly told right now that if we don't adopt the latest tech, we're going to fall behind. But it's not true. It's not true. If you think back, people didn't really fall behind. You catch up to things, and it can lead to this kind of like sterile sameness that traditional tools, just by their nature, don't produce. Because we're not we're primarily sensory creatures. Our senses are really open, and it's important to keep it that way by maximizing that connection to the body, because we take in the world around us and then we make work from that. So there's a difference between striving for excellence, and thinking that we can achieve perfection. Those are two different things. We can never achieve perfection. So for myself in this book, I certainly ran up against frustrations when I had to, for example, redesign and repaint entire rugs because they either weren't true to the authenticity of a motif or because I ran up against the limitations of my own ability. And it made me think that children are like that too. Children really like to learn practical, tangible skills. The mistake is to think that, like artists, that the children are just these free floating, creativity spirits. They're actually not. They really like to get things right. And giving them the opportunity to master actual skills is a really vital part of their development. It helps them to make categories for things like mistakes, disappointment, perseverance, all of that. So that's why I really loved exploring the process of creating these carpets, because with the natural materials they're making them out of that are manipulated by hand, as fine and exact as the end result will be, there's always going to be variations and errors and everything. So it may not be perfect, but human beings are not created to be perfect. We're created to explore and not to arrive. And I think that's something that artists and children go hand in hand learning that truth.
I love that we're created to explore, not to arrive. And then also, thank you for that. I also take procrastination to an art form. That's really that sensory idea that you need to have that connection with your body in order to create. And I also think it's such a great example to children, exactly that perseverance, that a mistake, we're just learning one more way that didn't work, and we're going to try something new. And having that embodied process, and that art and creation is about connection. And even and it's never going to be perfect, because what is perfect? Perfect's boring. And we're creating care and connection. So thank you so much. I really love that. And Tanya, the illustrations of Dancing with Water, they're so vibrant and they're so lush. And yet there are also tense and sad moments in the illustrations when the clean water becomes harder and harder to find. And at times, Kit, the main character, feels like giving up. This harm that has been done to the land and the water makes them sad and sick and scared. But their grandpa does not let them give up. And together they keep that connection to land and water. So Tanya, I'm also interested in your craft, and what is your process like in merging your illustrations with the narrative and in creating these beautiful faces and landscapes within Dancing with Water? Oh, Tanya, you're muted.
There we go. That's a great question. I don't know if it's described earlier, the premise of the book and what the subject matter is about. It's really important in talking about my process. In the book, Kit's grandfather teaches Kit how to find water using the traditional style of using a divining rod, which I think has its roots in Native American tradition. Like, I think that some of the freed slaves learned how to find water in the same fashion from, I think in that area of the United States, the Cherokee and the Blackfoot Indians taught them how to find water using this divining rod. So when you're using this divining rod, when Kit's grandfather was using this divining rod, he was relying on these really gentle tugs that would guide him to find the source of water. And he would go over all different types of terrains, and this gentle tug that he would have to be tuned into would help allow him to find that source of water. And I thought that was just a really wonderful metaphor for what it's kind of like to create art as an illustrator, when you're conveying emotions and you're connecting with the characters. Sometimes the full emotion of what's going on the inside of each character is not completely understood, but you understand it because of you can relate to the feelings of the character. And your job is to respond to those gentle tugs and illustrate the emotions, the fall of a shoulder, what's happening in the character's mind, the roller coaster of emotions that they may be going through, all in a simple expression. Maybe the shading of the sad look in the eyes, or the tugging of the mouth, or the lowering of the shoulders. So my job as the illustrator is to bring to surface those sad moments. And Kit felt a lot of disappointment. all of this time learning how to find this water and the community interacting and helping and so many people depending on them finding those resources and then running up upon this sort of conflict of the environment being interrupted by the building up of all of these hotels and giant structures and developments and the peaceful community sort of being disrupted by that. And just the simple gathering of water, which is detrimental for the community, being interrupted by that. That was really disappointing. And I really wanted to convey that through the, you know, not just Kit's expressions, but through the scenery and the environment. You know, I think that's also part of the journey too, as an illustrator. You're not just relying on the expression in the moment, but you're pulling color, you're using color and texture and movement to also convey those feelings and emotions. It's all very organic and fun to create. And there's a lot of starting over and over again. I think this is the image that really hits home when you're thinking about when they're having the breakthrough moment and they're able to, that's the divining rod, by the way, and they're able to finally find water again. This sort of joy that I wanted to convey. And it's almost like the showing energy and light coming through those emotions at the same time in the form of water, but a stream of thought and joy. You have to read the book and see exactly what I mean when I describe all of that. But that's sort of the experience of the illustrator. You're layering all of these thoughts, ideas, emotions, traditions, all of those things sometimes in one image on one page and hoping that it comes through.
Oh, it really does come through. That joy and that connection of joy through the water, it really comes through. And I love what you say about the tug, the comparison between the divining rod, that gentle tug from the land and from the water, being similar to being the tug from characters and emotions, because it goes to that point of we are not separate from nature. We are nature itself. So of course our creations are going to have those parallels. And also my parents sunk a well when I was a kid and they used a water diviner who came and found the water. So I really appreciated this book.
So
And
cool to watch. And my grandfather did that as well. He learned how to do that. And we didn't believe that it was a real thing when he told us that story as kids. But that's also another connection for me in the book.
yeah, it's amazing how I marveled at it as a child. So that joy in your illustrations really reflected the joy I felt as a child watching that process. And speaking of the joy in your illustrations, I would love to discuss these gorgeous illustrations in these books because picture books, they're such a beautiful merging of words and art. So I'd like to dive a little deeper into that relationship. It was a huge challenge to choose just one illustration from each book. Like I went back and forth dozens of times. So Vesper, let's begin with you. There's so much detail in each of these gorgeous illustrations in A Knot Is Not a Tangle. And art conveys so much information, and I can see that information in all of these details on every page of this book. And the book discusses the many types of designs found throughout Iran. So what was the research process like in creating the illustrations for A Knot Is Not a Tangle?
Yeah, Daniel and I, we had a lot of fun exploring several regions of Persia that we would want to place this in to find the landscape that would offer the visual feeling that we wanted to capture and what would frankly look best in a book. So there's a YouTube channel that some of you may know called Country Life Vlog. It's from right next door in Azerbaijan. And the videos are narration-free montages of a grandmother and a grandfather and all their animals and living life on their homestead. And it reminded Daniel very much of the kind of rural life that he remembered as a kid, this sense of lushness, of home-oriented life, doing everything by hand. So that provided a lot of inspiration. And the next thing I did was I got to know a local Persian carpet merchant named Fahim. And he spent a lot of time with me in his shop. And he very generously walked me through the specific motifs and designs of particular regions and towns, which have their own, personalized motifs that they use, and the process of actually making these rugs, which is not woven. It's literally not one knot at a time through the whole rug. I was also really mindful the entire time, speaking of these relationships, of the time spent working on hand projects with my own grandfather. It was constant in my own childhood. I was always with him. This constant making of things and how that represented being together. Those two things are inextricably linked for me. He's completely part of me as I work. Even though he's been gone for over 20 years, I work at his desk. I keep my artwork in a huge chest where he kept his engineering plans. I even use his mechanical pencil and rulers. So he's with me in a very tangible way as I'm making every book that I make. So overall, the approach that I took was this blend of real visual reference of the landscape and the process and the motifs, this in this brilliant treasure of rugs and carpets, as well as Persian miniature paintings. And that was really important because I wanted to attempt a kind of timelessness. Again, we were conscious of this, Patricia Polacco style timelessness that brings past and present realities together and lets you kind of hover within the beautiful Persian culture that is thousands of years old. So I hope I captured some of that feeling in the book.
Oh, you really did. And I learned so much from reading this book, and just delighted in all of the information and care conveyed in each illustration. Um, and speaking of care, Jenn, there's such a relationship of care between Charlotte and Grandma throughout the book. And this is exemplified in your words and in the illustrations by Rael McGregor. And I love the expressions throughout the book, and especially on this page. Grandma looking happy, Charlotte a little nervous, but there's also the step-by-step instructions of making moccasins and a real love for the science and the art behind moccasin making. And I love how the illustrations show that. So can you talk to us about these illustrations and how did you and Rael work to convey the science and art behind making moccasins while still centering this loving relationship?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, I was so delighted the first time I saw the sketches from Rael. It's kind of a weird, vulnerable feeling to write the story and then bring on an illustrator to create the other half of the book. And um, and I think what was important, maybe especially at the beginning when my editor Karen Voss and I were talking about an illustrator, um, it was really important that whoever we chose was going to be familiar with some of those technical aspects you just mentioned about creating moccasins. Um, Rael and I are both Métis, so I suspect that created just like a baseline level of maybe like knowing right off the bat, maybe somebody with a different background wouldn't have had. Even just simple things, or I say simple, but even things like what the pattern pieces look like in this image after you trace the foot, like it's maybe not common knowledge that it would be this kind of like U shape with a flat bottom. Um, but right from the beginning of the first sketches, Rael had that in there. Things like what leather looks like rolled up, or what the beading on a toe piece could look like. So I don't think I did very much here at all. I had a few small art notes, but Rael really took the text and she brought it to life. And we didn't really have much direct correspondence throughout most of the process, aside from me sending her a very excited message via social media after I saw the proofs. But I was really lucky. Karen kept me in the process, or in the loop, I guess, at each stage. And I don't know how common that is in the publishing world, but I got to see everything and provide feedback. And so, if I remember correctly, we made a few small tweaks to the background and a few nitpicky things about the moccasins, but really not a lot changed for the characters themselves. Rael, like you mentioned, the facial expressions, she does such a good job with those, and the body positions that really convey a lot in a still image. And um, and I think that highlights that special bond between Charlotte and Grandma. Um, Yeah, I something I really love and had nothing to do with is that when grandma isn't focused, like sometimes she's focused looking at the moccasins as they're working on them, but when she's not, almost always she's looking at Charlotte, even if Charlotte isn't looking at her. And I think that's this maybe simple thing that really conveys a lot as you go through the book. Or or the very first moment that Charlotte steps into Grandma's house, she gets swept into a big hug. And just the way, the body positioning that Rael drew this is perfect because we can see both their faces and just feel the joy that's there right from the start. So yeah, working with Rael has been a lovely experience for me.
I love that. And I love that warm relationship that you describe between you and Rael, and also you and your editor and the publishers. It really comes through in the book. I think we've heard the theme kind of throughout today has been care and connection, both with those who came before, those who'll come after, and then also in the process of the book. And I really see that care of making the moccasins and then also in the making of this book really come through. Thank you, Jenn. I love that. And then Tanya, the illustration we're going to bring up for you, it's the exact one that you showed earlier. I was so excited. Well, I went back and forth between this one and the one on the page before, but I chose this one because I would love to have it framed on my wall. The use of color, the joy, and it's such a rich choice of color for the moment the water arrives and that narrative moment when the water finally appears and it's clean and it's nourishing. And I love the use of pink and yellow in here. It's such a moment of joy and relief and gratitude. So how did you choose these colors? What is the meaning behind the use of the incorporation of pink and yellow in this water? Oh, and
Well, what many people do not know is that while I was illustrating this book, we were traveling. We were in Spain, and we were right next to the ocean. So I got to, while I was researching the movement of water and water textures and color, I got to walk right outside my door to the beach almost every day. It was kind of wonderful. But one morning I walked out and there was like almost a double rainbow with some of these yellows and pinks in it. And it just reminded me of the energy of our ancestors. I don't know, I just thought about how I could bring those colors into the book in that moment. I happened to be on that page and I said, oh yes, that's what that page needed. And, I went right back into the studio that morning and brought those yellows and pinks from that double rainbow that really especially stood out. And I felt like it, speaking of conveying energy, and emotion, I really felt that those colors said it best. And I really wanted to show a gush of movement and emotion. And to me, it also is a bit about auras. There's a bit of aura, like hearkening on auras. And that moment was such an explosive moment that I just felt that there was no better way to convey that bright light coming from within the main character in through that water. It just was perfect.
Oh, and I love that it was the water in Spain that brought that connection because water, it travels everywhere and it's all connected and it shows how we're all connected.
Yeah,
And so those colors really bring through that sense of joy, but also that connection. What a lovely story. Thank you for sharing that with us, Tanya.
thank you.
And I wanted to extend a big thank you. I wanted to say, Wado, thank you so much to all of our speakers today. I learned so much from all of you. I'm so honored to have been able to read your books and talk to you today. Thank you to all of the librarians and educators for joining us today. And next we have a short break. So if you haven't already, please visit the exhibit hall to chat with the booth reps and to learn about other forthcoming books. So again, Wado, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to everybody watching today. And I wanted to say, that was my alarm going off if you could hear that. That's just to show we're right on time there. Look at that. Just under the wire. I wanted to say a big Dona Dago Ha'i until we meet again to everyone watching today. Thank you.